So yes, I'm a very ticked off landowner. When this whole started, I had moved away from my home area for a while, moved back in 2021. About 5 weeks later, I get this certified letter in the mail that says, we want to put a pipeline through your property. Do what? And about 4 weeks later was the first of the public meetings that are required by state law. So Saragordo County was handier for me, so I went to that one. Well, this is the 7th meeting out of all these brand new meetings. Nobody knew what to ask. Nobody knew what this was. One person in that room asked about plume modeling. And of course, we did not get an answer from the summit spokespeople, but nobody else followed up on it. Nobody knew enough to ask anything else about it. And here we are 3 years later, well, nearly 3 years, when we went to the Iowa Utilities Board permit hearings last fall and begged and begged and begged, like we've been begging, for plume modeling, and we get told we can't see it because the terrorists might get a hold of it. So I sat there, and I can't shut my mouth. I sat there at the Utilities Board hearing when I'm testifying, and I said, I guess I must be a terrorist because I don't get to see it either. The original footprint is this blue with various lines coming in. That was the original line. It was proposed 2021. I am over here on the eastern end of it. This line goes 250 miles across the state of Iowa before it goes into South Dakota. Then last year they proposed this one, which is going to connect right outside my town. And now this year, with all these purplish colored lines, these are the new ones that they signed up this year. One of them is 40 miles away from my town of Rockford, but instead of taking it down to the main line, they're going to go east, connect it up, and hook it up at Rockford. Clear Lake and Ventura, there's a lake area there. They don't want to disturb that. That's kind of understandable, but we also have a very strong suspicion that part of the reason is because the guy behind Summit, Bruce Rastetter, has close friends in the area. We're dealing with all this volume getting added in, and I keep saying that Rockford could be Iowa's Satartia, Mississippi, because that pipeline is going to cross the northern edge of Rockford. It's going to be a half a mile from a K through 12 plus daycare school facility. It's going to be a quarter of a mile away from the northernmost residences in the town. It's going to cross the Shell Rock River at the north edge of town. Shell Rock runs northwest to southeast through town. So the properties of CO2 in a rupture are that it drops to the lower levels and follows. Where's it going to go? Down the river, following the current, following the airflow. The town is going to be toast. And the volunteer responders and fire department, their fire barn, is right on the edge of the floodplain, just shy of where the pipeline's going to be. They won't even be able to get to their barn, much less do anything. I have a variety of maps. This is a diagram of the original 13 Summit LLCs for water permits that we ran across a year ago and started to push against. I was showing this to some of the legislators over the last session, some information about our aquifers and the wetlands. We know even more now about the volumes of water that Summit would demand, and they say, no, this is for the ethanol plants, and we think, the ethanol plants are already operating with the water they've got. Why would you originally request permits for Lawler, 55 million gallons, Goldfield, 27.5 million gallons? So we know there's much more water involved in this whole process. And in the meantime, I think I heard this on an ag show, that irrigation use by farmers has gone up 41% in the last year. And that's all pulling out of our aquifers. We got the AI facilities in Des Moines and area drawing huge amounts of water for their cooling equipment. So how much water draw can our state sustain? And the aquifers don't recognize state borders, so it's not just us. If they're not concerned with safety, they need to be concerned with property rights. Because this is allowed to happen by a private company, then nothing is sacred. Originally, this was to capture CO2 and save us from carbon emissions, right? So it's supposed to be good for us, health-wise. Okay, recycling is good for the environment, right? What if I start a recycling plant next to your property? And business is really good, so I need to expand. And the Iowa Utilities Commission deems it a public good because I'm creating jobs. I don't have space to expand on that way, so I need to eminent domain your property. Isn't it the same concept as what they're trying to do with this? So nobody's private property is going to be safe. 3 years ago, there was no such thing as a corridor around the proposed pipeline. Now there is. With these new ones, there's people in the corridor that are getting notified, which was one of the things that we were very concerned about all along, was that the house where I grew up, it's across the road from the property of mine where it's going to go, if it gets a permit. The people in that house where I grew up, they don't get notified. And that's true of everybody along the pipeline. The neighbors, the tenants, the guy down the road, nobody got notified except the landowner. And sometimes they didn't even get notified. After this county required public meetings happen, then Summit can send out letters about doing surveys. Hazmat districts in the state of Iowa. So many of us are, like Rockford, our hazmat team is in Mason City, which is a good 25-minute drive in good weather, good roads. The thing is, their district goes 2 hours farther west. If they're already responding to something that far away, how are they going to respond to us? And most of these districts are the same way. You can tell by the coloring. If they're down here, how are they going to get up here? Yeah, so it's very widespread.
Yeah, that is.
And I've heard some first responders who are a little more savvy than others say, you know, we'll draw a perimeter and we'll stand back. Because they know, a few of them do know, that the CO2, you can't breathe unless you've got their scuba gear, their self-contained breathing apparatus. Over the last 3 legislative sessions, I have made a lot of trips to Des Moines, to the state capitol. I have learned a lot about our state legislature in the last 3 years, and a lot about the state politics and who's getting paid by who. And one of them was my own state senator, who thankfully has resigned. Here we go with Bruce Rastetter, the guy behind the pipeline, who also owns Summit Ag, and where I lived before I moved back to Rockford 3 years ago, Summit Ag headquarters was 1 mile away from our acreage. When my husband bought that acreage 33 or so years ago, not a hog confinement in sight. But now there's Summit Ag with hog and cattle, hogs and cattle, hogs, all the way around. That's one reason we left. And we get moved into Rockford, and 3 weeks later I get this piece of mail that says, I'm thinking, Bruce Rastetter, black cloud hanging over my head. So yes, we know Rastetter is, like Politico magazine dubbed him some years ago, the kingmaker. Contributed to former Governor Branstad, who appointed 2 of the previous members of the Iowa Utilities Board. They've since cycled off. The 2 replacements were appointed by Governor Reynolds, so all 3 are Reynolds appointees. We know that Rastetter has contributed largely to Reynolds, to her campaign, giving her airplane rides, that kind of thing. And then we have the people who, like Jake Ketzner, lobbyist for Summit. We see him all the time at the Capitol and at these meetings, the public meetings. He has all these former connections with Reynolds and Branstad's offices, and he's just one of many.